who does a trade war hurt more? What hurts us hurts them, and vice versa, correct?
Yes, both countries and everyone in the supply chain would hurt as a result of a trade war. I think, though, the intention is to rebalance the relationship, to get a little bit more reciprocity in the relationship, to open up Chinese markets more to imports and foreign investment, and not a trade war for a trade war's sake. But of course, you can get into a trade war, but it's very hard to get out of a trade war.
Now, let's take a listen to some of the tweeting that Donald Trump has done over the last week. Talking about that call from the president of Taiwan, he emphasized that the president of Taiwan called him. Interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I shouldn't accept a congratulatory call. Then a couple days later, he said, did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, making it hard for our companies to compete, heavily tax our products going into their country, the U.S. doesn't tax them, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so. Even Taiwan isn't celebrating this call to Donald Trump, worried about Chinese retaliation. How do you think the Chinese are actually likely to respond?
I think right now they're back on their heels and a little bit nervous and wondering what this deal maker who they thought might be able to talk straight with them is going to be like. And they're going to wait to see. On the case of Taiwan, you know, I think we ought to look and see what they do with Foxconn and other parts of the relationship. It's obviously very important. They don't want it. China doesn't want a trade war either. And so right now, I think both sides are just kind of dancing around the ring, getting ready to square off. And, you know, what Trump did in the last few weeks, last few days, basically just to put the Chinese on guard that something more is coming down the pike.
Now, Taiwan plays a critical role, as you mentioned, in the supply chain when it comes to the making of the iPhone, for example, and so many other electronics. How could this be affected, the actual supply chain be affected, if indeed there is an economic war of sorts?
Sure. Well, if there's a trade war just started between the U.S. and China, but also Taiwan could get easily dragged into it, especially given the sentiments that have recently been expressed. I think the canary in the mine for this would be Foxconn. Foxconn is, from Taiwan, the largest private employer in mainland China with 3 million employees, the place where iPhones all come together, 500,000 employees in the province of Hunan. And so if Foxconn runs into problems, they get a lot of benefits they get currently from the Chinese government to produce there. If they run into problems, we know that others in the supply chain, including Apple and others, would face difficulties as well.
So on that note, if Foxconn ran into problems, what would Apple do? Where else could they go? This is the company that assembles the iPhone.
Yeah, really, they'd be in the short term stuck and have to figure out a way to solve it over the long term. Everyone in that supply chain is connected to China in some way because, one, China has low-cost labor, excellent logistics for the global market, and two, because of all the consumers in China. So in the short term, it'd be a big challenge for Foxconn and Apple and all the others to adjust, although I suppose if they thought it was going to be a long-term conflict, they would, and I expect everyone's checking Plan B right now.
All right, any idea what how other companies are positioning themselves right now, given a Trump victory?
I think right now, actually, most companies are positioning themselves under the table, trying to make sure they don't get caught in the crossfire if a trade war gets started. So they're not overly criticizing the Trump administration. They're not criticizing the Chinese. They just want to make sure that if they do come to blows, that their business interests are protected.
Or they're pledging $50 billion to create jobs in the United States.